Apple Car project scaled back and delayed. Oof. Won't feature full self-driving capability. What? Well, then why are you doing it? I just had a road trip to Montreal, and I did not interfere with full self-driving at all on the Model S. I didn't touch it.
Way.
Well, I mean, I touched it when they told me to touch it. They said, you got to touch it. Are you alive?
You got to charge it, though.
That's the voice of my car.
You got to touch it.
You got to touch it. We're alive. Are you alive? Touch it. It's yelling at me. You understand? Reprimanding me. I didn't. All the lane changes, all the exits off the highway.
The merging and exiting off the highway.
Everything.
That's
and Will, even beyond that, the routing of the supercharging, and then just taking me to Kingston right to the supercharger. Like, this is your best path. We're going to charge now. You mind? I don't mind. Let's go charge.
So what's your reliability rating?
It's high, man. I did one trip. Let's all just
to Montreal.
Take her down a notch.
That's like, what, a 6-hour drive?
It's a drive, but it's mostly highway, and we all know it does best on the highway.
Sure.
And even the hotel I was staying at, and sort of, I wasn't like in downtown Montreal, which of course would cause a greater complexity, but still in and around town, the whole thing. Let me tell you what it did for me. It gave me. It's not that I wasn't paying attention, by the way.
Sure.
Like, I bet you my driver rating is probably high. What it gives you, though, is when that fatigue sets in a little bit, and I don't mean like necessarily tiredness, just the mental fatigue of driving. Just the kind of complacency that builds over hours of driving when you're just kind of like, you're watching, but you're not really you know what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
You're kind of glazed a little bit. You're a glazed donut.
You're not focused.
Your eyeballs.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Are turned into Krispy Kreme donuts.
Delicious. Okay.
Anyway, but you have eyeballs all around you. And so you have this.
Did you feel safe?
You feel safer. So long as you're watching, you feel safer because you're like, oh, I'm doubled down.
Any close calls?
It sounds like you want a horror story that didn't happen.
I do want to hear the experience.
It's time for me to get to the truth. I almost died 17 times. No, it never happened. One thing that seemed to consistently interact with the full self-driving in what I would say was maybe an overly cautious way was when you would have a weigh station for transport trucks.
Okay.
Because the way those are set up on the side of the highway, they're lined up. It's not like a rest stop where it's obviously like buildings in a parking lot. They just go in and come out the other side, and maybe you have 2 or 3 lanes. You know what I'm talking about, right? The weigh stations. And there were 2 separate times where the car slowed down when it noticed those weigh stations, and it seemed to possibly misinterpret or just be extremely conservative about those trucks on the side of the road. Like, I don't know if it was wondering if they were coming back, if these were lanes that it didn't see previously or what, but it would start to slow, like beyond the previous setting. Mm-hmm. And then you'd kind of like look around, you'd be like, what? And my kids would be like, what? And then I would just hit the accelerator and it would act as an override and we would just continue on. And then the other one is pylons, which I already knew about the pylon thing. Mm-hmm. It's not that it doesn't see pylons, it's its behavior around pylons isn't extremely consistent. So what I mean by this is the distance that it keeps, if the pylons aren't placed in a straight line, if one of them juts out or whatever it might be, sometimes there's you're feeling like I should probably have an input here, like just in case. Mm-hmm. But for me, my hands were primarily on the wheel anyway, not the wheel, the yoke, because I'm being asked to put them back there if I leave them off for too long anyway. I'm just like, I just found a spot to rest it. And then what that does for you is, if anything, even if you're wondering if something weird is going to happen, you feel as though you have the ability to override it in a moment's notice. Mm. And so you're observing the behavior of the car as a pilot instead of completely controlling it. You're observing its behaviors. It's actually a much different experience, I would say, than driving yourself, managing the accelerator. And even with the steering, going beyond any type of adaptive cruise system where, even when you pull over to a supercharger, let's say, like when I got into Kingston, it's really close to the highway. However, it's a couple of weird turns as you spin back around, and one of them happens pretty rapidly. You could easily miss it. But when you have autopilot on, you can't miss it. Or I should say full self-driving, you can't miss the turn. I'm sure you could, by the way. But at least in this case, it's more preemptive. And you're confident, or your confidence level goes up that this is not a concern of yours. Much in the same way as navigation felt in the early days. When you first got navigation, you're like, wow, I know where to go. Full self-driving is another layer to that.
Yeah.
Where it's not only do you know, and there's other funny things too. Like it announces what you're supposed to do, even though it knows full self-driving is on. So like turn right here, but you know that you don't have to because it's going
telling
to.
itself.
But it is also kind of nice to know what it's about to do.
Right.
And so anyway, some of these right-hand turns, some of these left-hand turns, they're not mint. They're a little comical at times, and if anything, overly conservative. If anything, like you could have gone, but it didn't go, and so on. So I had some experience with superchargers. I had some experience with full self-driving, and if anything, I would say it has shed even more positive light on what's going on with Tesla for me.
All right.
Based on I didn't. Again, it's the problem was I've only had so much time to invest in it and so many opportunities for these type of trips.
But this seemed like a perfect scenario.
It was a perfect scenario.
Yeah.
To give it a real crack, and I only got the full self-driving thing really recently that it rolled out. Just like mid-November, and this trip comes up, and I'm like, okay, perfect test bed for it, and at least that trip. And those conditions, that's another thing to mention, conditions play a role. We had mild conditions, good visibility, et cetera. But my feedback on that particular experience is like, this stuff is pretty amazing, pretty good. That limited. Because there was a thing, I know, I've seen the clips. It's hitting I'm making a left-hand turn and I'm looking at the curb and I'm just like, you're just going to hammer that. You're going to hammer that curb. And it does take those turns a little quick. It kind of accelerates through the turn, as you should, but accelerates into lane changes. And it's like anything else. Your confidence level will go up the longer it's able to perform without a hiccup.
Yeah.
I should also mention our roadways here are pretty good in general. And that's going to vary from place to place. So we're talking.
We just have snow.
That snow is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
But like the 401 from
It's a straight
Toronto
shot.
to Montreal.
It's very easy to drive.
It's well lit and painted, and I don't know. I mean, there's traffic on it. I had no traffic, but anyway.